Hi, welcome to 11.6 Congruence Transformations. So we've had that word over and over again in every section so far. Remember that congruence or congruent means equal. It also means it's going to keep the same shape and the same size. We also have learned about several different types of transformations. All of the transformations we've learned about so far produce congruent figures. Those would be rotations, reflections, and translations. They're moving a figure, but they're not changing its shape or size. Two figures are congruent if the second can be obtained from the first by a series of rotations, reflections, and translations. Since these are all things that do not change the shape or size, when you do it to any figure or you do any combination of them, you end up with figures that are the same shape and the same size. So number 1, describe if the two figures are congruent by using transformations. Explain your reasoning. So they're asking me, can I move A in some way, shape, or form to get the exact shape of B? Well, they look to be exactly the same size. They also look to be the same shape, except for A is tilting more to the right and B is tilting more to the left. I'm going to say, what if I reflected A over this line? By flipping it over, I've changed its orientation, and now it's leaning more to the left, just like B is. Then I would have to move it over just a little bit to the left, and it would move right on top of B. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference whether it was A or B. So I would say the figures are congruent because you can reflect A horizontally and then translate it to map it directly onto B. Now, some of you might have thought of this a little bit of a different way. You might have thought, hey, how about I move it over first and then I reflect it? Well, that works too. A lot of these have multiple different ways that you can move things around. So if you had instead said translate it and then reflect it, that works as well. Let's try another one. Determine if the two figures are congruent by using transformations. Explain your reasoning. Okay, so is there a way that I can move the red figure to map directly onto the green figure? Well, I'm going to take note of a couple things. First, they both have this piece hanging off kind of on its own. Then it has another piece that's sticking out. When I compare the red and the green, I see that there's one space between here and there's two spaces between here. No matter how I move the red one, I'm not going to be able to put it directly on top of the green one because they're not the same shape. Therefore, they're not congruent. No matter how I move it, I can't move them directly on top of each other. I would say the figures are not congruent. I can say no transformations will match the two figures exactly. It may help you to analyze the orientation or the relative position of the figures to determine if they're congruent. Remember, a translation, the length is the same and the orientation is the same. A reflection, the length is the same, but the orientation is reversed. When you look at yourself in the mirror, everything that's actually on the left is on the right. Everything that is actually on the right is on the left. It's a mirror image of each other. That's why we call it a mirror image. so the orientation is changed. In a rotation, again, the length is the same, but the orientation is changed because you are turning something. So with a reflection, think of a mirror. And with a rotation, think of turning something. So looking back here, A, B going to A prime, B prime, the segments are facing the exact same way. I just moved it down and to the right. In the next one with the reflection, A and B to A prime, B prime, it's now facing the opposite way because it's a mirror image. The last one, A, B, swung around this way to A prime, B prime. Again, the segments are the same exact length, but they are facing a different way because it's turned. Number 3, what transformation could be used if the letter W is the pre-image? Remember we said pre means before, so it's the image you're starting with. This is what I'm starting with. And the letter M is the image. It's the one we end up with in the logo shown. So how can we move the W to be the M? Again, you may see this differently than I do. They're not asking us if they're congruent. They're telling us that they are. They're just asking us how they move it. My mind works like first thinking, I need to reflect the W horizontally. When I would reflect it, it's going to now be an M. Then I would have to move it to the left. So I'm going to say option number 1, reflect horizontally, then translate left. Your mind may have said, hey, first I'll move it over so it's lined up with the green one, and then I'll flip it. You could say translate left, then reflect horizontally. Some of you may have noticed that I just need to turn the figure. Maybe you notice that if I make this right here my center of rotation, I could rotate it to be on the same spot. Okay, there are several different ways. So on problems like this on homework, it will say sample answer in the back of your book. If you do not have the exact same way that they wrote it, you just thought of it differently, and you can check it with me in Zoom tomorrow. So don't stress if your answers look a little bit different. But remember, the 3 things that you're going to use over and over again will be that rotation, reflection, and translation, because those are the 3 congruence transformations that move a figure, but they do not change its shape or size. Thanks, guys.